Hi, everybody, and welcome. I am here with Maranda Bower from Postpartum University. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yes.
Postpartum University. And I'm so excited to meet her for the first time. And I'm also very excited to take her program for practitioners that starts in April. That is all about healing postpartum, nutrition postpartum, and all the things that you can do to help women feel better after baby. And we're talking in the years postpartum, not just the first 6 weeks. So I'm super, super happy to have you here. I believe you live in Alaska, is that correct?
I do.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if it's colder where you are or where I am, because I'm clearly freezing.
Where are you?
I'm in Ottawa, Canada.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're at 32. We're right at freezing.
Okay, so we're actually lower than that. So
Okay.
Crazy. Awesome. So yeah, so I'm gonna just launch into this, and I'm gonna allow you to introduce yourself and tell us your story. Tell us how you got to doing the work you do now and helping women. How do you describe your designation and the work that you do? And yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. My name is Maranda Bower. Obviously, I'm the CEO and founder of Postpartum University, where we support both mothers and professionals and health and well-being in the postpartum period, including from things like depression, anxiety, hair loss, autoimmune diseases, all of the things that we don't talk enough about. And I got into this field after the birth of my son over 12 years ago, which feels crazy to say.
Wow.
And I had, quote unquote, the perfect birth. I did everything, quote unquote, right. Everything was what I had envisioned it to be. However, within 2 weeks, I could not care for myself. I could not care for my son. I was suffering from extreme postpartum depression and anxiety.
Wow.
And I didn't understand. I had no idea why I was experiencing this. I did everything, right. I, thought I was well taken care of. I didn't understand. It threw me for a massive loop. And so I had to crawl my way back to feeling better. I felt like as somebody who is a part of the birthing community, as I got pregnant with my son, I was like very much inundated in everything, birth and breastfeeding. And I wanted to know all the details. So I really got involved into the birth community. I joined the birth network in my local place. I did all of the things, took all of the classes. It was a beautiful pregnancy experience. But again, I was missing this massive component, and I felt like I couldn't say anything to anybody because I'm supposed to know all the things. I'm in the community. I'm now, I kind of put myself in that like a leadership position, and here I am struggling. I felt a lot of shame. I felt like I failed. And who am I as a birth and postpartum professional to be supporting other women when myself can't even put it together. Right? I can barely put my pants on in the morning. So it was a really difficult battle, and I forced myself to do it alone. And I don't ever recommend doing that because it can do more damage than.
Wow, that's quite the story. That's very powerful. And it's crazy because I came on this interview and I was happy, I brainstormed out questions and my friends helped me and people in my group helped me, and it was great. But at the end of the day, it's like you want to hear the personal stories of people because they're inspiring, because we want to know that everyone can go through crazy experiences. We want to know that not everybody has everything together all the time, and somebody that seems like they have it together, they might be struggling in a way that you don't really ever imagine. And this goes exactly to the point that you're talking about, how you can have the perfect birth and not the perfect postpartum. You can have the most horrendous birth and a beautifully supported postpartum. And so those things don't always equal the other. And it's just important for women to know that. I think.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. And, looking back at my experience, I'm like, man, I really do wish that I had said something. I really do wish that I would have sought out help, because I had prolonged how long I was in there. I suffered so much longer. And we don't necessarily talk about the effects that this has on our children either, mainly because we have so much shame and guilt already as it is for going through the experience. The last thing you need is, additional shame and guilt. But I think we still deal with the consequences of me being so mentally sick, right? Our bodies get ill sometimes, and so does our mind sometimes. And that's exactly, I will tell you, like, the significance of my experience, and I share this story often, but I had so much anxiety that I would fall asleep, and then I would wake up just 20 to 30 minutes later in a full-blown panic attack, scared that monkeys were going to come down from the ceiling and take my baby. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that my thoughts were completely irrational. I did not understand why I was having such irrational thoughts. I knew that they were, quote unquote, crazy, but I couldn't stop them, and I couldn't stop my emotional response to them.
Wow.
And that is, I really do wish that I would have received help. And so, this is why you hear so many professionals and so many mothers who have struggled through postpartum depression and anxiety. The first thing that they've told you, if they've recovered, the first thing they say is, you have to go get help.
Yes.
And we shout that from the rooftops every single time. Like, you hear that repeated over and over and over again. And what might be helpful for one person may not be helpful for another, right? It may not be therapy. It may not be the counselor you're seeing, right? It may not be, what your friend Sally did, or what your sister did, or whatever the case may be. It might be unique to you. And that's probably the hardest part, is like finding out what support that I need. You barely put your pants on in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Finding something, seeing if it helps, moving on if it doesn't, sticking with it if it does, and building your health and healing from that point.
Wow. Yeah, we're all individuals, and I guess we have to experiment in a way. Let's talk about that. How did you figure out, I guess you did it by yourself, but how would you recommend people go about it? Like, do they see multiple different types of professionals? Do they see a nutritionist and a naturopath? Do they see different types of healers? Like, how did they figure out what's wrong and help themselves feel better? And the number one question I have that I want to get out of this interview is, at what point do you know that your body has healed postpartum? Or are we just never the same? Or is it just when your energy level is back to pre-baby? Like, how do you know what that time is? And yeah, how do you figure that out?
All such great questions. And I'm going to start with your first. So if I forget anything or miss anything, let me know. So, in my own personal journey, which I do not recommend, it was so much trial and error. And I am a science junkie at heart. I want evidence-based information. And so I know where I was a science major before getting pregnant. Like, science is my world. And so the first thing that I did was, okay, what does the science say? And so I was investigating medical journals. I was reading everything that I could possibly do in terms of mental health around postpartum, and also anthropological studies, cultural studies. Like, these are something that is very important to me. And I think, and what I teach in Postpartum University is a combination of all of these things, because they tell the real story when all combined together. So that's where I began my journey. And it was fascinating, the information that I was finding. It was fascinating, the information that worked versus didn't. And I started documenting that. I started looking at it like a science experiment. It truly was, this, investigation that I was under. And that's what kind of helped, keep my brain going. I mean, again, that's how my brain functions and operates. It might not work for everyone, but it was very healing in that approach, but also how much I had discovered. And I was surprised and shocked that we are not taught this information, that we completely, we don't have this. And it was mind blowing to me. And so from that experience, I, really started to take that to heart. I started actually teaching courses. I started running retreats. I had I had all sorts of things. I started talking at universities and conferences, and it was it bloomed from there. I mean, I was constantly working with women, helping them heal their bodies. And I created a 5-step framework in which this is a universal framework that is pertinent to healing our bodies during the postpartum period. And so it's not a matter, I know that from my personal experience, if I had to seek out a counselor and a doctor and a nutritionist and, a Reiki healer or what, like all of the things, I would have been so overwhelmed. I mean, making that one phone call was difficult enough, let alone making multiple phone calls and trying to juggle my entire schedule around that. It was absolutely impossible. There's no way. And so I created essentially what I needed. And so that's what I do now in Postpartum University. I have a program specific for professionals and teaching them how to help their mothers heal. But I also have a program for mothers and professionals who are in the healing journey and wanting to apply my 5-step framework. So here's what I recommend. You find that support system. Absolutely, positively, you have to have at least someone to go to, whether that is a very private and supportive Facebook group, or a sister or a mother or someone that you can do. Yes, absolutely, a doula. That is what they're trained for, right? And it doesn't get any more beautiful than having somebody who is trained to hold space for you without judgment and can point you in the right direction. Absolutely. So all of these things, find support. The second is nutrition. And this is a conversation that I literally can go on and on for. I have a masterclass that I'm teaching after this with over 400 people registered.
Oh, amazing.
Where I'm talking to professionals on postpartum nutrition for at least a solid 90 minutes. And I'm only like teaching that much, right? And you're registered for the certification program. You have 12 full weeks of information coming to you. So I will just basically say that the way we function, the way our bodies changes, we know our bodies change, but nobody talks about this, like how our gut actually changes, how our hormones change, how our brain shifts, right? And so the way our gut changes, we actually process and digest foods very differently. And we're at a very critical space and time in the postpartum period where we need a maximum amount of nutrients humanly possible to not only heal our baby, but also to regulate our hormones or heal our body, regulate our hormones and begin the breastfeeding experience. So, I mean, imagine what it takes. I mean, just like we grew a human being, we birthed a human being. Now we have to heal from that, not just the birth, but also the growing for 9 months. And then we're going to nourish that baby with our own body afterwards.
Yeah. It's nonstop.
It's insane, right? And so many women are missing several components of important nutrition, whole body nutrition. And that's usually where the spiral of autoimmune disease, depression, anxiety, and all components are tied together. I can't stress this topic alone. When I work one-on-one with clients, when I work with clients in my group programs, when I train professionals, we start at nutrition. It has to be nutrition. Otherwise, we are failing everyone, right? If you're struggling with depression and anxiety, and you have not gotten a nutrient testing done first, before your diagnosis, your providers have failed you.
Okay.
Like you have to go back. Okay. So I can go on and on and on about that. So that's the second pillar.
Yeah.
And then we have, and I'll just briefly share the rest of these very quickly, but it's getting better sleep, which we can all attest to. Balancing out your hormones, it's like a nervous system reset. There's trauma healing that's included in that. There's so many other components, and then finding your rhythms and your cyclical living cycles that are a part of you. That's often a whole nother subject that most people don't even touch on. So in that framework, using that with a multitude of people to support you, which is what the program I created is, then we are offering a whole body approach to health and well-being in postpartum. That's specific for a body that is, 3 to 5 years after birth.
Wow, that is so beautiful. The framework sounds like all the things that you would need. And I'm just wondering, how do you make it, as a practitioner, how do you make it so that nutritional changes or additions or subtractions are not overwhelming? Because I find food is one of those things that is often so hard to change, right? And we get very attached to certain things. Certain things give us comfort when it comes to food. So how do we make it easier for moms to kind of like slowly go into that? Or let's say we're working with a mother that doesn't cook or doesn't have a support system that cooks for her. How would you make it accessible for her? That's kind of one thing that I'm always think about when, like, I'm very good at just changing my diet and being like, okay, you're telling me to add this, subtract this, easy. Like for me, that's easy. But a lot of people, it's not. So I'm just wondering, like,
hands down. And I will tell you, I am not a big fan of cooking.
Yeah, I'm not either right now.
Have that on the side, on your side. Like, as much as I am about nutrition, I'm really not a fan of being in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And so, I think one key component here that we have to understand is that the old way of doing things in terms of nutrition, the way we have been taught, and nutritionists and dietitians have been coming out over the last few years and speaking about what we're learning is, and this school of thought is not applicable any longer, that there's new science and new data that shows us that counting calories or counting nutritional values, like how much vitamin A am I getting, how much vitamin D am I getting, or how much calcium am I getting, that is no longer the correct or appropriate way to make sure that you're getting the nutrient values. So throw that out the window. We are not counting anything. And I think that in itself is so freeing for so many women, right? It will not help you lose weight. And a matter of fact, in postpartum, it often will help you gain weight, which is the reverse of what so many want to do. It also has a tendency to cut off your breast milk supply. Like we have to shift our focus. And so when we're able to shift our focus and say, okay, what are some whole foods that are nutrient dense and easy to digest? And if we focus on those, then we can, and without like adding a bunch of restrictions, right? That doesn't mean that you don't have a piece of cake once in a while, because we have to understand that food is not just about nutrients. It's also for the soul, right? Food is soulful. And so there's a multitude of components, but when you take that out, it's like, oh, it's so great. And then as someone who's providing this information, who's, if as a doula, like coming into this space and saying, here's a multitude of recipes, right, that are really amazing for you. Throw them in a crock pot, throw them in an Instapot, forget about it, and you have a meal very shortly after that's so nutrient dense and ready for you, and very easy for the body to digest and get those nutrients that we so crave during this time. And I will tell you, when you are touching on this and you are helping support a mother at this level, first and foremost, you are simultaneously meeting the needs of her baby and her family.
Wow, that gave me chills.
Yeah.
So
We often focus, and I see a lot of moms do this, like you can go to Pinterest and search all the foods that you should eat for breastfeeding, and like, what do we do for our baby? And we never, ever just say, well, what do we do for mom?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as we regulate ourselves, our baby just auto regulates through us, and it's beautiful.
Yes. Hands down.
I love that so much. Thanks for saying that. So, okay, let's get into some questions here that we came up with for you. I have a question here about, I guess, signs of depletion. So first and foremost, how do you know if the fatigue or the low energy you're feeling is from a lack of sleep or is from a depletion? And how do you know? And then one question my friend asked is like, hey, my period didn't come back for like 3 years during nursing. Like, she was breastfeeding this whole time, but not very much in the last, year and a half, just very little. So is that a sign of a depletion, or is that just her own individual body saying like, no, for you need to have your kids spaced apart further, so when you're breastfeeding, you can't make another baby. So how do we know what's a depletion and what's something else, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, the framework that I shared with you, the support, the nutrition, the sleep, the nervous system reset, and then the cyclical living, when one of those is off, the other is off. Right? So it all works together simultaneously. And this is why you can't just eat better and expect to feel better. Like, there's other components that you have to be doing. And I recognize, like, if I just threw a bunch of things at you, it would be very overwhelming, right? Like, that's not the goal. It is a lifestyle shift. It is a change in the way that we are approaching our life. But if you're not getting enough sleep, your hormones are off. The way you digest food is going to be off.
Yes.
And if we're not getting enough sleep, you're probably not making very great meals, and you're just reaching for the things that are super easy, like snack foods or leftover mac and cheese, right, from your toddler. And we know that that's not healthy, right? We have to be real with ourselves. And the same goes for nutrition. If we just focus on nutrition, right, and we don't worry about getting enough sleep, and we're, getting 4 or 5 hours, maybe 6 if we're super lucky, right? Your hormones are processed and regulated in that evening, in that sleep period, using the nutrients that you gave it during the day. And so if that's not happening, then your hormones aren't going to be regulated, which makes digestion even more difficult. And nervous system, your nervous system regulation is off, which also affects digestion and brain function. And like, all of these
all goes together.
They're all hand in hand. And so if your question, well, gee, am I depleted, or am I not getting enough sleep? The answer is both. The answer is absolutely both.
Wow. And if one you can control, but one you can't, would you then just go and get testing for the nutrition stuff? And then as you can start getting more sleep, you try your best, obviously, to do that as well. But you kind of like deal with the thing you can control. Like, for example, I have twins now that are 20 months old. And oh man, could use more naps there, but I'm doing my best to prioritize that. But yeah, like, in my mind, I really need to figure out, because this is another question that I had and my friends had, is like, how do I know? I haven't been breastfeeding now for about 8 months. And I want to know if my body's ready for something like a parasite cleanse or like something like that, or fasting. And that's not something that I should be doing unless my body is like fully replenished and nourished postpartum. And I'm, it's just, I shouldn't be leaching more nutrients out of my body. And so that's another question. Like, would you go and get testing done to know if you're okay nutritionally, or maybe we just work with you and then you can help us decide?
Yeah, testing, I have an entire podcast episode on nutrient testing, even hormone testing. And I strongly feel like information is king or queen, whatever, right? Information is absolutely amazing, but our bodies are already giving you information, right? If you're experiencing anxiety, depression, fatigue, constant headaches, mood swings, your hair's falling out, you have brittle nails, you're struggling to make it through the day, you're experiencing autoimmune symptoms, you're depleted.
Yeah.
You're already depleted. And so you can go get testing, but you also need to be aware of several things in regard to testing, right? And that testing is often based on studies of men.
Wow.
And lowered to reflect a smaller human size, AKA a woman. There is not a lot of evidence or scientific research on the nutritional needs of a woman, let alone a woman who is in postpartum and experiencing, a lot of hormonal changes and all of these things. So you can go get that testing done, but you have to take it with a grain of salt, knowing that even if you show up in the normal range, that might not be normal for you.
Because you're breastfeeding and you're
just
healing. So there's so many things.
So many things. And so I always base it on your symptoms. If you have the symptom list that I just shared with you, and there's plenty of more that we can add on to that, and that began during your postpartum experience or one of your postpartum experiences, we already know you're depleted. And it's interesting, like testing will tell you, oh, you're depleted of this, and you're depleted of this, and you're depleted of that. But oftentimes when we're depleted of one, we're depleted of multiple ones, right? Calcium and magnesium work together, like it works together with vitamin D. Like they all work hand in hand. And that's why we have to focus on whole food nutrition and stop with focusing on how much vitamin A am I getting? How much, choline am I getting? Like it's not supportive or helpful for us in the least bit.
Oh, I love to hear that. You really need to use your own intuition and body awareness and tuning into yourself. And, you can use science to kind of like go with that. But both are super, super important. That's so important. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I just have one more question for you before we tell people how to find you and how to sign up for your program if they want to. What was it that I was going to ask? Hold on 1 second. I just flew out of my brain. Look at that. So to what extent does postpartum trauma and having a really disappointing birth or a traumatic experience in some sense kind of affect how your body's able to nourish itself postpartum? Do those neurological things affect your gut and affect the way you're able to assimilate and digest foods? I feel like a lot of people just don't focus enough on healing that and don't really go through like the steps to kind of to move through their trauma. And I feel like that can actually prevent people from having more children. And so I'm just wondering, in your experience, helping women with that, has that really helped everything else? Like we're talking about symbiosis, and helping them, regulate themselves and nourish themselves better and their mood and all that.
Yeah. It's an absolutely like key component. And so when I talk about nervous system reset,
Yeah.
I'm talking about trauma healing,
Mm.
right? And I'm talking about the way our brain functions, the way you communicate with yourself. Is it an abusive relationship? Is it a healthy relationship? Like, there's so many components. And so our journey into motherhood, and we don't talk about pregnancy trauma enough either, but
Right.
when that trauma exists within us, even if it's not related to pregnancy and birth, it could be a childhood trauma. Majority, I would say over 90% of people who I work with one-on-one and within my group programs, they have experienced some early childhood traumas.
Wow.
And that comes up in postpartum. There's a multitude of cultures around the world that believe that in postpartum, we are closer to God than any other period in our life.
Wow.
And they have this belief because we are so raw and so vulnerable that our ability to connect in and see the trauma is very much prominent. And so this is why women experience, I had one person come up to me recently and was like, Miranda, I'm 6 months postpartum, and I just remembered that I was raped at 16. Wow. And I blocked that out. Why am I remembering it now? I can't remember that now. Like, she was so overwhelmed. And of course, right? Because you are so raw and you are so vulnerable, and this is your opportunity to heal deeper and more profoundly than you had ever experienced before.
Wow.
And that is just the gift that is postpartum. And I can go like, there's actual like scientific, like I can talk about the shifts and the changes in the brain and why this is occurring for so many of us. But really it's an invitation to heal our bodies. And quite frankly, we just live in a world that has never taught us how to do that. We barely know how to cope, let alone heal. Those are two very different things.
Yes.
And very, I know for my generation, we didn't talk about coping. We didn't, let alone healing, right? Like, this wasn't a conversation.
Right.
And so I came into adulthood with zero coping abilities. And of course, I had no idea how to heal my life. And that's what I'm seeing repeatedly through the work that we do here.
Wow. That's beautiful. It's a great way to sum it up. And it's tragic for me that so many of these ancient kind of knowledge and ideas and information about nutrition and how to nourish a woman before she even has babies so that she's fully replenished before she even thinks about, having babies. All of this information has kind of been swept under the rug and lost over the years. And I don't know if that's with the rise of the medical establishment and, the diminishment of like, I don't know, the healers and women that used to run the show. I'm not sure, but it's very tragic. And I think that you're doing such an amazing job in bringing all this back. We need to bring it back because it's so lost. So many women are struggling. They have no idea why. They don't know where to turn. And they're just having a really awful postpartum, not to mention during the pandemic, like the last 2 years, it's been like having depletions, not being able to see anyone. It's been insane. And I was having babies in the middle of this when I didn't even, we didn't know what it was yet or how dangerous it was yet. And wow, that took a lot of self-regulation for sure. And I definitely took it as an opportunity to rise and heal and overcome. But for some, it takes a very, very long time when they're not having the community and the support and the knowledge. Like if they don't know about you, for example, like it's important to like know that you exist to be like, I can go somewhere for help, and you're accessible virtually. It's amazing. So so let's talk about where people can find you, how they can work with you. Do you do one-on-ones? And when is the program for practitioners, the 12-week program, when is that starting?
Yes, thank you so much for asking this. So you can find me at Postpartum U, that's the letter U.com, and everything is there. You can find me on my social media channels there. I have a very big podcast, so you can find the link for my podcast if you're into that kind of thing. Really, there's two places that you can find me. My one-on-one programs are pretty much closed. Like there's always a wait list, and right now we're maxed out, so we're not doing one-on-one. But if you are wanting the support for healing yourselves, you can go to my website, postpartumu, the letter U.com/reclaiming. And we talk about reclaiming postpartum wellness, and I walk you through step by step my framework, and I connect you in with a group of professionals. So it's a very private group. You have access to lots of information, like a step by step, like how to heal your body. You get all of the recipes, you get all of my tips and tricks on cooking, how to sleep with an infant and a toddler. Like we go into all of the details, and you have access to myself for personal questions, coaching, also Reiki master, neuro linguistic healer. You have access to a clinical psychologist, a naturopathic doctor, and a gentle parent coach. So like everything that you could ever need is in one package, and for a ridiculously beautiful low price. And then we have my certification program. So this is only open twice a year. And it doesn't matter if you're a professional. Majority of the time we have doctors and midwives and chiropractors, and doulas register for this program, but we have moms who do as well, who want, to build a career out of this information. And that starts April 11th of this year. It's a 12-week program. You can learn about it at postpartumu.com/certification. And we actually close for registration on May 1st. So you have to register as soon as possible. If that is something that you want to do and join us for. But I will tell you, we only have a couple seats left. So yeah, that's where we're at. That's where you can find me.
Oh, awesome. I was really on the ball. As soon as you opened the doors, I was like, I've been on the waiting list for like 4 months or something. I don't know. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy how quickly it sells out. And I like to keep things really small and intimate because it creates just like the best learning environment. It feels so good for everyone participating. So because we focus on your personal healing too. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I did not.
Yeah, it's so very important that we experience this healing as well as our clients, right? Like we are our first client and we have to choose. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. I know you're very busy, but I will definitely connect with you again, just over email or whatever. And I'm very excited to start your program and have a beautiful day and have a great masterclass.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it and can't wait to connect more.
Me too.
Bye.